Hi, everybody. So today I had a cumulative book haul to go over. Unfortunately, I have none of the books in front of me, but most of them are books that a majority of them I talked about in my Christmas video that Matt and I made yesterday with the book haul. And some of them have also been reviewed in other videos. So instead of showing you the books for the book haul, I'm just going to talk about them a little bit and review them for you because I have read a majority of them. So this is a cumulative list of books that I bought from October to December. And I will link the videos in the description that these books are reviewed in. So the first books that I bought in October were Coraline by Neil Gaiman, which I gave 4 stars to, and Fairy Tale by Stephen King, which I gave 4.5 stars to. Then I bought The Guest List by Lucy Foley, which I gave 5 stars to. The Final Ghost Support Group by Grady Hendrix, which I have mentioned before in other videos, which I gave 4.5 stars to. Matthew Perry, A One-Year Diary of Grief, which I just reviewed in my new releases wrap-up video. I will link all of my past videos below with all of the reviews. So this video will be shorter than my videos where I tier rank. The next book I wanted to talk about is The Raven and Other Edgar Allan Poe Poems. I have not read this book yet, but I am going to be doing some reading of poetry soon because I need to be inspired to write more poems. So I'm going to be reading that book as well as the Mary Oliver poetry book I got for my birthday last August, and Emily Dickinson poetry too, and other smaller collections of poetry that I have. In November, the purchases that I made were A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher, which is a modern retelling of the fairy tale The Goose Girl. I reviewed this video in my tier ranking where I reviewed fairy tale retelling books, and for somebody who has never heard of the Goose Girl fairy tale or never read it before, I really liked this retelling of the fairy tale and learning about a new fairy tale that is not really talked about, because most of the Disney movies that fairy tales are based on are like Disney princesses, Snow White, Cinderella, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, all of those fairy tales. So that's why I was so excited to introduce myself to a new fairy tale through A Sorceress Comes to Call. Another T. Kingfisher book that I bought is called Thornhedge, which is a modern retelling of Sleeping Beauty that is from the point of view of the person that is guarding Aurora's tower. And I really liked this creative way that T. Kingfisher retold Sleeping Beauty. The other purchase I made in November was Make the Season Bright, which I reviewed in a review video earlier this month after I had my book club meeting at Print Bookstore for Reading the Rainbow. The next book I have, the last purchase I made in November was The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. This is one of my other favorite Lynn Painter books besides Better Than the Movies and Nothing Like the Movies. I believe it's the sequel to Betting on You. Betting on You was not that great. It reminded me of the movie from the 90s that maybe you guys have seen before with Rachel Lee Cook, who plays Marianne in the Babysitter's Club movie. She plays a girl who gets made over for the prom or something, and that's what this book is based on. The Betting on You. And I didn't like the main female character in Betting on You because he was really rude and he was a bully. The other Lynn Painter book that I really liked this year that I read was called Happily Never After, which was her new release from March. For more recent purchases, I have bought Have I Told You This Already, which is a memoir that Lauren Graham from Gilmore Girls come out with. It's an essay collection where she talks about various things about being a TV star. One of my favorite essays is called I Feel Bad About Nora Ephron's Neck, which is kind of ironic because the other essay collection that I read was by Nora Ephron. It's called I Feel Bad About My Neck, and it's an essay collection about being a woman and getting older. I read both Have I Told You This Already and I Feel Bad About My Neck for my From Stars Hollow to Gilmore Stars, from Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR, which is books that are either inspired by Friends characters or memoirs by actors from Friends and Gilmore Girls. The next purchase that I made is Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. I got some Christmas money in the mail from a family friend, and I went book shopping today, and I bought 3 books: Hello Beautiful, A Room for One's Own by Virginia Woolf, and Of Time and Turtles by Cy Montgomery, which is a nature book that Olive at A Book Olive recommended. And I will be toning down on making so many purchases in the coming year because I know that I need to start saving more money for other things, like my trip to Florida. That will be sometime in the coming year, but we don't know yet because we haven't picked a date. The next book that I want, so Hello Beautiful is a modern retelling of Little Women that is set in the modern day. I just had to buy my own copy of it because I loved it so much. And I really connected with the female lead character, Julia, who is supposed to be the modern version of Jo March, who is my favorite character from Little Women because she's a writer and she loves acting in plays. And this is the reason also why I connect to Rory Gilmore so well on Gilmore Girls, because she's also a modern version of Jo March. I learned about this because I read this nonfiction book that Olive recommended called Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, How Little Women Impacted Modern Culture. And it just tells about like how Little Women was written and how many in the various adaptations that the movie has gone through, and what modern day characters in TV shows and movies are representative of Jo March. Rory Gilmore was one, as I just said. Katniss from The Hunger Games is another one. And then there was another one that was mentioned, but I don't remember off the top of my head who it was. The next book is called I'll Be There For You. This is a book that is by a journalist from New York City, and she wrote a book that goes into the behind-the-scenes aspects of Friends and what went into making all the episodes. So, obviously, as you can tell, I'm really into learning more about my favorite TV show, Friends. So, when I saw this book on Olive's video about nonfiction that is based on TV shows, I knew I had to pick this book up, and I have borrowed other books from that video from the library, including As If, An Oral History of Clueless, and Seinfeldia. And I'm also planning to read, and I've also read Sex in the City and Us. So thank you, Olive, for all the recommendations for books on movies and TV shows. I will also link Olive's video in the description box with the rest of the videos that I review these other books in. The next book I wanted to talk about is a new release called Not in My Book by Katie Holt. I just reviewed this book in my video from a couple of days ago where I tier ranked new releases. That video will be linked in the description. To avoid being repetitive, I will not say again what I liked and disliked about this book. The next purchase I made is The Magical Language of Others by E.J. Coe. So this book was recommended to me by Olive at A Book Olive, and it's a memoir that's about a girl who is Korean, and she is separated from her mom as a teenager because her parents moved back to Korea because of political reasons, and it's about how their relationship builds, and it's a story written in letters, and the writing in it is very beautiful. It kind of reminds me of This Is How You Lose the Time War, but instead of a romantic couple, it's about a relationship between a mother and a daughter. And this book is also on my From Manhattan to Stars Hollow's TBR. And this book makes me think of Lane and her relationship with her mom and how strained it is because of the cultural differences that she has. Another book I'm reading right now that I'm rereading is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, who is the lead singer of the band Japanese Breakfast. And then I am reading another book called Girl in the Band, which is by another girl. It's a memoir by a woman named Kim Gordon. I don't have the book in front of me right now, so I can't look at what band she's in because that's in the about the author section. Another book that I'm reading for From Manhattan to Gilmore Girls TBR is The Dinosaur Artist by Paige Williams. This book, I found out about this book through a list that I found online through the Chicago Public Library about books that describe Gilmore Girls characters. And this book was listed under the character of Ross because obviously Ross Geller is a paleontologist who works at the National History Museum in New York City. And this book reminds me particularly of him at the end of season 1 when he goes to China for his conference about the dinosaur bone, and that's where he meets Julie. So I think that's probably why the person who put together the list from the Chicago Public Library picked this book to describe Ross, and I think it's a good choice. Another book I recently bought was on sale for 20% off at Target yesterday, and it is called The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros. When I first started watching BookTube videos, I was watching videos from Sarah, Destiny, and Haley, and all three of them mentioned this book. I don't remember which videos they talked about this in, probably videos from a couple of years ago, but this is a historical fiction book about a girl who's a writer, and she's trying to write a book that's based on her grandmother's experience growing up in World War II, and I'm only about 45% into this book right now, and I'm really enjoying it. Rebecca Yarros is also the author of Fourth Wing, which I have talked about this series before. I loved Fourth Wing. I hated Iron Flame. I'm not going to read the next book in the series, which is coming out next month. And the other historical fiction I read by Rebecca Yarros, I mentioned in my new releases wrap-up video that I did a couple days ago. It's called Variations. I refer to it as a modern retelling of The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks because basically it is that. It's a romantic comedy about it's a romance about this girl, Allie, who's a ballerina, and this guy, Hudson. And Hudson has a little sister who Allie becomes really close to, and I think their relationship is really sweet. And Hudson is supposed to be the stand-in for Noah's character based on my analysis, but he's a lot nicer than Noah, because if you have read The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks, you will know that Noah is a very mean character and he's very abusive to Allie. So I gave Variations 4 stars. I gave Not in My Book 3.75 stars. I gave The Magical Language of Others 5 stars. I gave Have I Told You This Already 5 stars. I gave Hello Beautiful 4 stars. And I gave I'll Be There For You 5 stars. The other books that I wanted to mention in this video are books that I mentioned in the book haul video that Matt and I made last night. So I wanted to go over my rankings for these books. Better Than the Movies gets 4 stars. I Was Made for This, which I'm about halfway through, and it's also on my From Stars Hollow to Gilmore from Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR, and it gets 4.75 to 5 stars. The next book is The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden, which I am rereading. I originally read it a couple of months. I read it last month, right before Thanksgiving, and I will review that in a later video that is a smaller independent video from this book haul. The next book that I wanted to mention is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and this book is set in the 1970s, and it's about a girl who is 13 years old. Her name is Lenny, and she and her parents moved to Alaska. I am about 50% into my reread of this book, and I should finish it by tomorrow. The next book I got for Christmas is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is a World War II historical fiction about 2 sisters named Vianne and Isabel. And when I first read this book earlier in the summer, I really loved the sister relationship. And I think I'm going to make a separate video about books that I've read about sister relationships, because I've actually read quite a few books this year that focus on that, including Little Women and Hello Beautiful and Daydream by Hannah Grace. So I will actually make a separate video about that. The next book I got, let me go get it. The next book that I got for Christmas is a book I accidentally forgot to mention in the book haul video that Matt and I made yesterday. It is the sequel by Jean Hanif Korelitz, and I read her first book at the beginning of the month. It's called The Plot, and it's about it's about an English teacher who publishes his student's manuscript after he passes away in a car crash, and I'm guessing that this book is about this guy writing a sequel to the book that he published after the manuscript that he's published that was by his student. So I can't wait to get this started. I'm planning to start it tomorrow. The final book I want to mention in this video is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. This is by Lori Gilmore, and as I said in the video that Matt and I made yesterday, it is set in a town in Canada that is similar to Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls, and the town from Book Lovers by Emily Henry called Sunshine Falls, and the town in Oregon, Bright Falls, that is in a romance trilogy by Ashley Herring Blake. Only this town, Dream Harbor, is set in Canada. I think it's in Ontario, and I am 50% through this book, and I am really enjoying it. I also read book 3 in this series, The Christmas Tree Farm, and I really enjoyed it. But I gave it 3 stars because I have liked other Christmas romances that I read this month better, especially Love Light Farms and The Mistletoe Motive by Chloe Leese. So I will also be re-uploading my re-uploading my holiday tier ranking video soon because since it is the end of the holiday season, I have read many Christmas books since I last filmed that video on December 5th, and I would like to wrap up that TBR. 2 books that I got from the library that I finished that are also on the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR are Garlic and Sapphires and Tender at the Bone. These are 2 memoirs by Ruth Rachel, and they were recommended to me by Olive at A Book Olive. The first one is about how she had a job in the 90s reviewing restaurants for the New York Times. And basically, she had to put on costumes so the people working at the restaurants wouldn't notice her when she came in to review the food. And Olive said in her review that this reminded her of the scene in Mrs. Doubtfire where they are dressing Robin Williams up to look like an old woman. And as she said in her review, this definitely brought out the inner theater kid in me, because when I'm on stage, I love becoming a different character and picking out my costume. And I imagined myself in Ruth Rachel's position with having to wear the different costumes. And these 2 Ruth Rachel books reminded me of Monica because because Monica is a chef in a fancy restaurant in New York City. And I just watched the episode where she actually gets that job because she gives the restaurant a bad review, and then the guy comes over to yell at her at the Central Perk apartment, and she ends up getting hired by them to prove what she can do. And Tender at the Bone is more like a memoir of Ruth Rachel growing up in New York City and cooking with her family as she was growing up. And we are making one of the recipes from Garlic and Sapphires later in the week, and I will be reviewing that later on when we eat it. So thank you for tuning in and have a great night.